What he means to say when the producing class doesn't require the so-called communism, he means to say that the producing class have their dominant soul as appetite. As a result, they will not have reason. Now, for these fellows, when they do not have reason, there is no concept of telling that you have to be like this or not. Let them do their duty, let them have their own property, as there is no chance of corruption. So, this is what he says, and that is the reason why he keeps away the so called communism away from these people, and he advocates only for the guardian class. Only for the guardian class. Why? As per Plato, family is a bigger evil, and even property is unfair means. Then property in unfair means. As a result, he has given an additional safeguard apart from education. So this is how he proposes his theory of communism. Now, why Plato has given such a deep thinking? If you do remember my earlier classes, I said Plato was speaking for an ideal state. He was from Athens. Athens lost war with Sparta. He was analyzing the reasons for that, and he analyzed one reason, or he has diagnosed that. What is the diagnosis that he has done? I said this. Plato is considered as one of the physiologists. Physiologists, right? So, what is the diagnosis that he has done? The diagnosis that he has done is that Athens is suffering from some disease. What is that disease? The disease is the rule of ignorance, right? It is being ruled by the ignorance, and it is suffering from double jeopardy or double whammy. What is that double whammy? These rulers, those they are ruling, they are ruling. So, what is the problem of Athens? He has diagnosed it is suffering from some disease, some illness. Athens is suffering from illness. What is that illness? Rule of ignorance. Ignorance is vice. As a result, what is the thing that he has propounded? He has propounded that you should be having knowledge. You should be having knowledge. In order to understand what is knowledge, he has propounded theory of idea. So here we have discussed about cave allegory. Right. Now, when you have the so-called knowledge, he has given cave allegory, and he has said something called the metal elements in human soul, such as the gold, silver, copper. We discussed this, and he compared them with the three classes. He divided the society into three classes. Then he said that as it is rule of ignorance, there is no justice. So he has written a book called The Republic. In his book, the subtitle is Concerning Justice, and he is speaking about what is justice. Now, in his concept of justice, what he has said justice is stationing the people in their respective places. In order to station the people in their respective places, first you should know to which place they are belonging. In order to know them, you have to give, he has proposed a theory of education, the three forms of education or five forms of education. After this, even after stationing, the philosophers on the guardian class might be having some selfishness. As a result, he proposed his theory of communism. In his theory of communism, for the guardian class, he said that the guardian class should not have family. If they are not having family, they will not have interest in property. As a result, theory of communism of Plato contains family and property, which means Plato is, again we have studied three things here. He is looking for a superior race. He is looking that the family is just for the institution of marriage is just for procreation of the children, and the children will be treated by the state. Now, why he has said all this is rule of ignorance, which is making Athens to suffer from this disease. Now, why rule of ignorance? These fellows, they doesn't know what is the real wealth. The ignorance are ruling. As a result, they do not know what is real wealth, and that is the reason why they go on tend to corrupt their offices or tend to corrupt their power. So by using power, they corrupt. As a result, as long as it is ruled by ignorance, you have to suffer from dual setbacks. One is you have to tolerate their ignorance, and these are ignorance. They do not know. They will have arrogance. With power, it comes arrogance. Now, what Plato says is ignorance and arrogance is the deadliest combination because even if they are ignorance, you can teach them if they are not arrogant. But arrogant people, they will not accept that they are ignorance. As a result, you cannot change them. So, this is what Plato said. As a result, what he is saying is now give them education when they are born so that you can make at least arrogance to go out and you can make them educated. No, the reason is what he said. Athens is, or the diagnosis that he did is because of this rule, Athens is suffering from one disease that is called Athens is not a one city, it is two cities. What is the two cities? One city is the rich, the other city is the poor. Now there is a social discrimination between the rich and the poor, and who is rich, who are in power are rich in Athens by that point of time. As a result, he said that this is the reason why two people were very unhappy with Athens and they were not supporting the Athens in the war against Sparta. As a result, Athens has lost the war. Being a patriot, being a totalitarian, being a person who wants a perfectionist, he has given this theory of communism to ensure that he will be removing the so-called the division of rich and the poor in his country so that the country will be egalitarian or equality where the rule will be not by ignorance but the rule will be by the so-called wise men. Who are the wise men? Plato himself is a wise man. That is the rule of philosopher king. Why philosopher king? Because now the philosopher king is having good reason because of his education system and he has lost his selflessness due to he has lost his selfishness due to the so-called theory of communism. As a result, now he is ready and now he is ready to become the so-called eligible for ruling. This is what he says. So this is then additional safeguard. Theory of education and theory of communism is how philosophers are made, and through this philosopher, as philosophers are knowledge persons, knowledge is virtue. As a result, they can now he is given the solution for this problem, right? As a doctor, as a physiologist, he has given this treatment for the so-called the illness of Athens, and that treatment is the treatment of philosopher king. In that treatment, he said this, and to have this, first he has said this theory. So if you look at this, everything what Plato is saying is Plato is wanting to make Athens as an ideal state. Whatever the theories that we are studying, this is studying or this is related to only an ideal state of Athens. What is ideal state? It is a just state. What is a just state? A just state is a state which is present in the heaven with the God. The kingdom of God is a just state, and he wants to make Athens a just state, which is the God's state, which means he wants to make Athens the heaven on the earth. Right, he has given this, and this is how his patriotism is being felt, not just like Har Ghar Ka Tiranga, but he has been quite serious about his theory. Now, now the thing is, so this is what he has said. So, who is an ideal king? As ideal ruler, a man of knowledge, a man who does not have family, who has no courage for property. A man of knowledge, he should have. Who is a philosopher king? Who is a king? They should be having knowledge. He should not be having family. He should not be having property. So, as a result, yesterday Sahitya was. Some people are asking, "Sir, is there any philosopher kings in the world today?" Maybe even Manmohan Singh will not suit to this because he has family, he has property. Maybe to some extent, Atal Bihari Vajpayee might be the thing. But again, uh, this is some idealist policy of Plato, which it is very difficult to find in the modern day world, not only the modern day world, but even in the ancient Greek, right? So this is what he was saying. Now, what is the criticism of Plato's communism? Criticism. There will be criticism, right? You have to write criticism also. By this point of time, you should have understood that Plato is speaking some nonsense which are not present to the, which cannot be implemented, right? So what Plato said? Plato said three things. State will decide whom has to marry. That is, Plato is propounding totalitarianism, or state. Plato is going for eugenic way of marriage. State is propounding racism. State is saying that it is institution of family is just for procreation of children. This is what this fellow said, right? Now, what are the criticisms that he has got due to this? Now, the first criticism has come from his own disciple, the famous Aristotle. Aristotle is not only the greatest disciple of Plato, but also the greatest critic of Plato. According to Aristotle, what he criticized is, according to Aristotle, the institutions of family and property are time tested. They are time tested institutions. Since time immemorial, these institutions are existing. When the human beings were born, when the human civilization is born, these things started. Sir, on one hand, he is promoting egalitarian society, on the other hand, he is restricted only the guardian class from maintaining family and property. Is it discriminatory? I'll come to that point. Let's finish this so-called criticisms. So he's saying family and property is a time-tested institution, which means throughout the human civilization, these institutions are existing. Then Aristotle says that if these institutions are present throughout the human civilization, they are not present out of blue. They are not existing just for the sake of name. They should have some purpose. Which means Aristotle says that beyond recreational activities or procreational activities, institution of family and property have one thing that is called some utility. They are functioning with some utility. So what Aristotle says is private property and private families are having utility. So property is having some utility. Now what is this utility of private property? What is the need for private property? Aristotle says that private property is, who says this? Aristotle. Aristotle says that private property is the source of motivation. It inspires people to work hard. As he is having private property, one who has private property will have stakes in stability, which means they always long for a stable state. They don't revolt or anything, stable state, which means they will not be inclined towards revolutionaries or revolutions. They never ask for revolution. They wanted to safeguard their family, they wanted to safeguard their property. As a result, they will be away from revolution. This is what he says. Now, if there is nothing you have, you'll be ready to give up your lives. For example, the ISIS terrorists, they have no family, they have no property. What is there to lose? Right? ఏమీ లేనోడు ఏమీ పోగొట్టుకునేది ఏమి ఉండదు. Right? Now, once you have family, once you have property, then you'll be looking for stability. Thus, what Aristotle says is private property and family contributes to stability of the state. Contributes to stability of the state. This is first thing that he has said. So first thing what he is saying is the critique of Plato is Aristotle, and he is saying that the institution of family and property are time tested. If they are time tested, if they are existing right from day one, it means it has some utility. And if you look at what is the utility of private property and private families, that is, it is a source of motivation. They are the sources of stability. As a result, when people have private property and private families, they tend not to revolt, and that contributes to a stable society. And that is the greatest advantage of private property and private families. This is the first or second criticism that is done by Aristotle. The next one, what he says is private property is a virtue. Once you have property, people will do charity, right? Once you are having something to eat, if you are having excess, you will serve the society. That is what he is saying. Now he says that communism is not good. Communism of property is not good. So what he is saying, private property. Private means individual. Aristotle continues to say that communism of property is not good. Communism of property is not good. Why communism of property is not good? Because according to Plato, everyone's property is everyone's property means everyone's property means it is no one's responsibility. No one's responsibility. Kachiguda railway station, Secunderabad railway station, everyone's property, but no one will be responsible. That is why they will be spitting, they will be breaking whatever they find, they will be misusing them, right? So what Aristotle says is, if you say that property belongs to everyone, you are saying that no one is taking the responsibility. So what Aristotle famously said is, everyone's property is no one's responsibility. Everyone's property is no one's responsibility. As this is another criticism that he has done. Communism is property is a dangerous thing. Why? Everyone's property is no one's responsibility. Now he is also saying there's some more thing. What is that? Family is having very important function, that is, it contributes to emotional stability of the people. People will get comfort emotionally from the family. If they are feeling low, if they are feeling dull, if they are feeling emotionally out of their minds, then family is the institution which gives them emotional safety. Now he also says that it is going to be communism of property and communism of the so-called life. Communism of property and communism of family is going to be a regressive step. It is going to be regressive. Why it is going to be regressive? Because it is not going forward in human evolution, rather it is going back to the so-called nomadic way of life. You are taking the man to the stage where he was born. Through the human civilization, slowly people started coming into family because this family is having some advantage. But by saying that communism of property, communism of family, you are saying that you are taking back those societies years, or you are taking them into the so-called stone ages or the nomadic lives. Hence, Aristotle said that these institutions may have problems. Yes, Aristotle is saying that, yes, I do agree that these institutions of family and property is having problems. There are problems in these institutions, but the solution is not what Plato has said. What Plato has said is abolish them by having communism. But what he said is, what Aristotle said is, rather than abolishing them or rather than totally removing them, Aristotle said that they had the solution is reform the institutions, reform the institutions, not removal of the institutions, but reforming the ill state, ill institutions is the solution for this one. That is called uh, institution of families, problems of institutions of family. So, in this way, he says that Aristotle becomes highly critical about Plato in these ways. One is, what is the criticism of Aristotle's or communism of this fellow? One criticism is it is old age tradition, time tested tradition. As a result, as it is time tested tradition, it is having some advantage or it is having some utility. So, this is first thing. The second thing is it is a motivation, it is the source of stability, right? He says that as a result, he says this. The third one is, if you are saying that property belongs to one is no one's responsibility. The fourth one is it leads to emotional stability, and if you are taking this step of communizing the so-called property and family, you are taking them to their nomadic stage, or the stage where human life has begun. As a result, the solution should not be abolishing or communizing the property of family, but reforming the existing system which has these problems. A very beautiful, practical insights given by Aristotle and his teachers things, right? So he also says that if you are making the state everyone's property, children is, you said that children will be belonging to the state. A child who is belonging to state is a state who belongs to none. As a result, the children in the care of the state, they might lose their childhood because the state might mistreat them. So what Aristotle says is it is safe for the child to grow under the banner of their children, but of their parents, rather than under the state, because again he says the same thing. uh, Everyone's children is no one's children. If you are thinking that state is having the responsibility of the children, then that children becomes the so-called orphans altogether. That is what he says. And rather than your perfect ideology, it is going to create imperfection, because there will be no emotions, there will be no civilized life, there will be no stability, because revolutions happen here, there will be no hard work. Why should we work hard? As a result, what you are doing is, rather than your perfectionism is making the entire state to go to chaos. That is what Aristotle has said as a criticism to it. As far as Priyank's question is considered, yes, I do accept that. On the one side, he is promoting egalitarian society, but on the other side, he is restricting that only for the guardians, families, and properties. Now, again, this is something not only egalitarian, not only here. If you look at Plato's theory of classes, if you look at the so-called Plato's theory of classes, even in that theory of classes, what he has done is he has divided already the state into three classes, and he is dividing the state. And as per that division, critics say that he is an enemy to open society. What is open society? A society where you will not be having any class differences, but Plato is advocating class differences based on superiority of the soul, or the dominant element of the soul. Hence, you cannot call them as a so-called, you cannot call them as a so-called uh, you cannot call them as the so-called egalitarians. Rather, they are just finding out, or they are saying that uh, these are the criticisms of Plato. They are propounding their ideologies. Now, egalitarian in one sense, because he is the one who has started giving equal respect to women on par with the man. On that angle, we can call him as egalitarian, but he has divided the classes. Now, the last theory here is how the present day communism is different from the so called Plato's communism. How Plato's communism is different from modern communism, or the modern day communist philosophy has been propounded by the father of modern day communism is Karl Marx. How Marx, this Plato's communism, how Marx communism is different from Plato's communism. The first difference is modern communism is associated with Karl Marx ideology. Now he was a critique of capitalism. Now, in order to protect poor from exploitation, he has given this theory of communism or Marxism. Whereas some scholars like Maxey, Western scholars like Maxey, some scholars like Maxey compares Plato's communism with Marx's communism, and they said that Plato is the father of communism. Maxey held that, M-A-X-E-Y, Maxey held that Plato is the father of communism. What do I mean by Plato is the father of communism? He mean to say that whatever Plato and Karl Marx said is almost similar. So this begs the debate. With this debate of Maxey, they started debates whether Plato's communism is similar to the modern communism. But though on the cursory look, it appears to be communism, but there are deeply some differences between Plato's communism and the so-called Karl Marx communism. So the similarities are superficial. What Maxey has observed is just superficial. The similarities are just superficial, but fundamentally there is some differences between both. Fundamentally there exist some differences. What is that fundamental differences is Plato is an idealist, I already said, whereas Karl Marx, will study him as a materialist, right? Materialist, he is bothered about the material world, whereas he is bothered about the ideal world. Marx in his entire philosophy will be rotating about economy, money, right? The world revolves around money, that is the concept of Karl Marx. But as his Marx is an materialist, Plato is an idealist. Now Plato divides the state into three classes: the producing class, the soldiers class, the warriors, and the ruling class. Whereas Marx proponent for class elimination. He is the one who proponent for classless society. So this is the fundamental difference where he is saying that there are three classes. He is saying that there should not be any classes in the society, all has to be treated equally. Now he is basing his communism on the so-called spirituality, the kingdom of God, spirituality. But Karl Marx is basing his concept on economy. So his concept is economic, his concept is spiritual. Plato's communism is only for the so-called Plato's communism is only for the guardian class, whereas Karl Marx communism is for all, for all. Now this Karl Marx has recommended that communism has to be through violence and bloodshed. Violence and bloodshed. ప్రపంచంలో ఉన్న వర్కర్స్ అందరూ వచ్చి పోరాడాలి. Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your own chains. That is what Karl Marx said. Right? పోరాడితే పోయేది ఏమీ లేదు, బానిస సంఖ్యలు తప్ప. ఎలా పోరాడాలి? By creating violence. That is the Marx propounding. But whereas when you look at Plato, Plato never advocated for violence. Never advocated this. This man has openly advocated this violence. Next, Plato believed that state is ultimate virtue. State is individual writ large. State is the instrument of virtue. Instrument of virtue. Virtue is good. So Plato said that state is virtue, whereas Karl Marx said state is the source of exploitation. State is source of exploitation. So never consider that state is a good thing because it is working for capitalists and it is working for exploitation. What Karl Marx says is, look at the state. Narendra Modi is working for Mukesh Ambani or Adani, not for the people. As a result, They are working only for capitalists, but it is a source of exploitation to the workers. This is what Karl Marx says, but Plato says state is an instrument of virtue. This is what they say. Plato talks about communism of family, but this person never speaks about communism of family. Thus, the only common thing between these two persons is the only common point is they believe that private property is the source of evil. Both believe that private property is source of the evil. Hence, the only common point them is even Plato believes private property is the source of evil. Karl Marx believes that private property is the source of evil, but this similarity ends here, but the rest of the things are differences that you find between both the people. This is Plato's theory of communism, right? So, what we have discussed today, we have discussed something called we have discussed something called we have discussed two or three things. That is, what is Plato's communism, why he has advocated communism, to which classes he has advocated communism, uh, what exactly does he mean by communism of the so-called family, what is the advantage of communism of family, and we have said what is the critiques of Plato's communism, and then we have discussed what is the difference between present-day communism and the so-called the erstwhile communism of Plato. So these are the five things that we discussed. So whenever they are asking about this question of Plato's communism, always remember in political science, your introduction has to start with context. In which context you are writing the answer. If the question is about theory of knowledge, give the context that he want to position or station the people as per their elements of the soul. If you are speaking about the so-called communism, give the context that communism is the auxiliary guardian or the second guardian to remove the so-called selfishness, and in his ideal state he is creating these things. So political science introductions has to start with context. ఏ context లో ఆన్సర్ రాస్తున్నారు అని, right? If you are not mentioning the context, text will be appearing, but that text will be just like a call, right? Text will be just like a call. So when writing the answers in political science, the first thing is you have to always write them in the context. Context means ఏ టెక్స్ట్లో అది చెప్పారనేది రాయాలి. If you are not writing the context, text will be right on your page, but it will be a con. Con means, what is the meaning of con in Telugu? Mosam, right? Only con will be there, right? Not text. Now, so always write the context, otherwise your answer appears to be superfluous. What is the context? Every context of Plato is one thing. All the context of Plato is only on one thing, that is called, he is always trying to establish the so-called, this is the context of Plato, the heaven and the earth, right? This is about the so-called Plato's theory of communism. Today I'll end here. Tomorrow I'll finish Plato, and then from Monday we can go to Aristotle. But if you look at previous year questions, they have not asked much questions on Plato. But why I am going in depth is all the other theories of political science comes from this man. This is called Plato and Aristotle. That is why you have to study them in depth. That is a requirement of studying them into this. Otherwise, there is no point of studying for the sake of one question, which maximum they will give for 10 mark, right? So this is about Plato. Now tomorrow what I'll discuss is something what Priyanka has spoken now, whether he is an egalitarian or he is an enemy to the open society. I'll discuss that. Plato is having his own share of criticisms. We'll discuss that criticisms. We'll discuss something about his philosopher's king, and then we are done with this topic. Right. This is what the thing is. If you have any questions, you can ask me now. Are you able to follow? What you are doing with notes? What you are doing with notes? Okay. Thank you, Rohita. I'll do one thing. I'll ask few people to type these notes that I'm saying, and I'll share it to you people so that it will be helpful for you also. Right? Right then. Have a nice day. Have a nice weekend. Thank you, Shravani. We'll meet tomorrow. Bye.